coming to you right here from Chittenden County, Channel 17, CCTV, Center for Media Democracy and Town Meeting Television. Rights and Democracy is a people-powered organization committed to creating fundamental, long-lasting political change, bringing the human rights back down to the people that deserve them. This month, I'll be your host, Grant Taylor, and I'm joined by two guests here in the studio, some fantastic guests, and another one who will be calling in on the phone. To start off, directly to my right is Debbie Ingram, Chittenden County State Senator. Next down the line is Mark Hughes. He's the Executive Director of Justice for All and a RAD board member, and also candidate for High Bailiff in Washington County. And joining us shortly will be Scott Guerin. He'll be calling in from Rutland County. He is a Rutland County State Senator Democratic candidate and a RAD member and the treasurer of the Rutland County Democratic Committee. So I'd like to get started out here just trying to promote these candidates' campaigns. All three of these guys have been endorsed by Rights and Democracy for this November election, and we're hoping to give you guys all a little bit of their message tonight. So I'd just like to start with a first open-ended question to everybody, and feel free to jump in whenever you feel happy to. What got you into politics?
Alrighty, well, I'll start if Mark doesn't mind then. What got me into politics? I want to help people's lives be improved. I really want to contribute to my community, and that's what's always been my motivation. My dad was actually the mayor of our little town when I was growing up, and he set a really nice example of that he taught me that was one way that people could contribute to their communities by running for office. And then over the years, I've done other things to try to improve people's lives. Most recently, the last 11 years, I've worked as a community organizer, and I've helped other people to participate in our democracy and to make sure that their voices are heard and to have the faith that they can make changes that will help improve other people's lives and their own. And so I thought, well, it's kind of a natural progression for me to go from that into trying to really get my hands in there in the government and be at the table when decisions are being made, and try to level the playing field and create opportunities for everybody so that our state works well for all Vermonters.
Awesome. Starts in the family.
That's true. Yeah.
Very cool.
Now we know the rest of the story, right?
Yeah. I don't know about you, Mark.
Yeah, politics. It's interesting because when you first said it, Grant, I was thinking to myself, what got me into I'm in politics? So that's the first question. Because what we're talking about is we're talking about policy, right? We're talking about folks who make a difference in policy. Right now, many people didn't know it, but yeah, I'm on the independent ballot for High Bailiff in Washington County. I haven't campaigned. There's nothing out there at all, and I did it mostly because there's some things that led me to believe that it was the right thing to do. Over the last couple of years, I've been involved in advocating for policy as an activist in communities across the state, and those who know, as a result of some of that work and a pretty large coalition of organizations. As well as you, Debbie.
That's right.
We were able to move Act 9, the special session, which is the racial, what did they call that thing at the end of the day? They changed the name so many times.
Yeah,
I guess they call it racial equity, equity panel. And so we won't get stuck there. And also it was Act 54 last year, the only two major pieces of legislation that address racial justice and systemic racism in Vermont. So policy, it started with a lot to do with policy, and that led, me into an understanding of a lot of different things, surrounding, public safety, law enforcement involvement, and so forth. And I was looking for a very, very low-hanging fruit, opportunity to kind of put my foot in the water, just to show my support this cycle. And I did some research on what the High Bailiff was all about, which I'm sure Probably nobody knows.
I don't.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah,
and,
great.
And it was kind of a natural progression. So it started with activism and the sense of a need to move socially uplifting policy.
Nice. We love it. All right. It sounds like Scott has called in.
Hey, Scott.
Are you there? Are you there? Hello, Scott.
Yes.
Hello. Thank you for calling in.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Right on. Were you able to hear the first question and Debbie and Mark's responses?
I got the end of Mark's response. I gather the question is, what made you get into politics?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I have been in politics since I was in high school, which was, I'm embarrassed to say, long time ago, because I grew up in a Quaker environment where I believed everybody ought to be treated with dignity and respect. In my childhood, I had a middle-class childhood, and when I became a teenager, all of a sudden I saw that my world expanded, and I saw that most of the people in the world were denied what I had, access to health care, good schooling, an economy that worked for everybody, allowed them to support themselves and their families. And it broke my heart and made me angry. My family has a tradition of fighting, going back at least as far as I know to my grandmother, who was a union activist in Tsarist Russia and fled to the United States when the Tsar's secret police started harassing her parents.
DNA.
My first election campaign was helping the local Democrats defeat Carmen DeSapio, who was the last Tammany Hall machine boss in New York City. We won that first vote by 41 votes, and that taught me the power of political engagement. And all the rest of my life, I've been fighting for fairness, justice, security for all of us.
Fantastic. That's right along the lines. Debbie mentioned that she had some family influence that brought her into the political world, so that's great to hear. All right, so now I'd like to move on and just go ahead and kind of dig into y'all's deeper interests and ask you what the most important issue is to you in your campaigns and in your time during this next session. This isn't to say that you're only interested in one thing or only interested in this thing, but I just think it would be nice to highlight for every viewer out there what each of you really is focused on, and that way, if there's a good connection, hopefully we can get people working together on this. So you guys want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
So, well, the single most important issue to me is passing, once again, a minimum wage increase to $15 an hour as soon as possible. We've been talking about different years now. We did pass the legislature, both houses, passed it last year, and sadly the governor vetoed it, and we were able to override it in the Senate, but they didn't have enough votes in the House. But I think that is the single most important measure that we can use to help bring people out of poverty, to change the dynamic, because right now we have so many Vermonters who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And that just simply isn't right. That's, there's something wrong with the system that is set up that way. And raising the minimum wage will enable people to pay for their housing, pay for their, their heating, their fuel for their cars, their child care. It will get them much closer to being able to make make ends meet and support their families.
Yeah.
So.
All right, that's cool. Great to hear. Obviously, getting that put forward to the governor's desk was a huge success for all of Vermonters.
Yes,
and so good deal.
Yeah.
Mark?
Oh, what can a high bailiff do?
That's a good question.
Well, constitutionally, his or her only responsibility is to arrest the sheriff, and I'm really not interested in doing that. But I think again, I want to go back to policy and what I would like to see, come out of this session. What I'm looking at right now, it's in front of me, is House Resolution 25 that was put forward by Brian Chena last session, and this is a resolution, I quote, encouraging the Senate and the state of Vermont in 2019 to initiate a proposal for a state constitutional amendment and remove from the Vermont Constitution all language authorizing slavery or indentured servitude. And I know, Debbie, you were involved in part of that process. The Senate failed to even introduce it, and the House did introduce it, and it stalled out in government operations. So what does this really mean, when you start taking a look at systemic racism, which is something that's near and dear to my heart. It envelopes every single issue that we talk about, to include the issues that Debbie just introduced. We're being dog whistled left and right on it across all issues, and even affecting the electorate to the extent that they're going to the polls and voting against their own best interests. So, addressing systemic racism, in my mind, in my heart, I really truly believe that the best. Why would you not start in the Constitution?
Why would you not start right there?
So what are those issues that are wrapped up into that conversation? From labor to how we care for our children, to how we categorize our prisoners, to slave labor. When you start talking about Vermont correction industries, we have to talk about moving inmates across borders, which is literally interstate slave trade. And I could go on and on and on talking about labor, just talking about the intersection of race and economics.
Yep.
But I think there's a lot of conversation. We won't even talk about the oaths that our elected officials have taken, to the Constitution to date, and the fact that it's never been changed since 1777.
Yeah.
So that is my biggest concern. That's my biggest issue. I think it's the beginning of a conversation if we start those debates and we include that in our public discourse.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. That's high up on your list, because as I've looked a little bit more into this issue.
Oh, you did?
Right? I've heard things like, okay, so that's in our Constitution, but our Constitution's superseded by a higher Constitution, so we can't follow those rules. It's not legal because there's another rule saying that ours don't matter.
But the other rule says that slavery is constitutionalized as long as you're in prison. So that's the 13th Amendment.
Why would you even hide behind a higher rule that discontinue?
Well, that's the
Let's
first
just get it
response.
out. Let's just
get it
let's
out
just
there.
act right to begin with. So I'm happy that that's up there.
And if I could just insert that I have already talked to, I've already asked Legislative Council to draft the first step to amending the Constitution to remove all mention of slavery. I've been working with Mark on this, so we're in concert on that, and there is
Together we win.
it's a
Together
lot
we win.
it's a
we
longer
win.
process than just passing a regular bill to actually amend the Constitution, but
Right.
but we can only do it at certain time periods. But I've already I hope it's a little presumptuous of me because
Sam?
I haven't been reelected yet, but I want to get the ball rolling. Hopefully I will be reelected and we can start hit the ground running on changing it.
Good deal. Hey Scott, what do you got for the most important issue for you in this session?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm completely on board with Debbie and Mark's issues, but I think the most important issue for me to focus on is health care. Our health care system is totally dysfunctional, and it's important to me in two different ways. The first way is it's not serving people. There are too many people who don't have access to health care. There are too many seniors cutting their meds in half to save money, or faced with the choice of heating their home or paying for their meds. There are too many people suffering from substance abuse that could be helped with medical treatment for their substance abuse that they don't have access to. And equally important is the financial side of the healthcare system. The reason why our small businesses are suffering, struggling, and going out of business in many cases is largely the rising cost of health care for their employees. The reason why the tax burden on working Vermonters is going up year after year is largely because of increasing health care costs and the really obscene and immoral way that the pharmaceutical industry is jacking up the prices of meds. So the dysfunction in our medical system is just driving us into the ground in so many different ways at so many different levels. And we can take practical steps here in Vermont, starting with universal primary care, to begin to fix that problem. And if we don't, then it's just going to make it really hard to find the resources to address any of these other issues, all of which are important.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was just listening to you speak there, and it's kind of like our healthcare is this apple out in front of our nose, and it's kind of trying to drag us around to get it. And I feel like it should be kind of more like the path that we're walking on instead, that we can stand on it and get somewhere with it instead of chasing it down all the time.
Absolutely. And one other thing I'll mention that hasn't been high on the radar screen, the influence of big money in politics. We really need to campaign finance reform. We need to empower voters, give voters a voice, and by a program like they have in Maine or they have in Seattle, where voters get vouchers, so that they get a voice as well as people with big money. And that I mention that because the pharmaceutical industry is making huge contributions to Vermont politicians, especially our Republican colleagues. And if we don't get if we don't start to get big money out of politics again, it's going to be very hard to make progress on all these other issues.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you for mentioning that. So the next question that I have for everybody is something that all the viewers can take home with them. How can people help you in your campaign to get elected in November? What can they do between now and then? We've got over a month.
Great. Well, they can vote for sure. That's vote themselves.
Register
It's really important.
and vote.
Register and vote. Yeah, and actually, voting is open now. So we have early voting in Vermont, and you can go to your town clerk's office and vote right there, or you can request an absentee ballot and do it at home. So. Or you can go on the day, but also, I would ask that people tell their friends. If you make a commitment to talk to 5 friends, make sure they're registered. Tell them, maybe these are the people that I'm voting for. This is what's important to me. If you share my values,
you can have them watch a recording of this show if they have any questions.
There you go.
Exactly.
Watch
Exactly.
this.
Yeah. And and then I would say also, use social media. That's still a great way. Tweeting, Facebook. Some positive messages out there.
Twitter seems to have a pretty big impact when some people use it.
When some people do, yes,
So-
that's
so
true.
go
It's
for
true.
it.
It's true. It's true. And if I could, I don't know if I'm allowed to actually say, but there's this little thing called greenbacks. These little
Money.
dollars, money.
Oh,
yeah,
oh.
that,
For
that
you.
are
Yeah.
yeah. That
We
but
were
anyway.
we were just talking about it.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. But yeah, it unfortunately
Money doesn't hurt.
does
Time, money. Yeah, exactly. It
does
doesn't
take
hurt.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was not the first thing that we asked for.
But please vote. That's
Yeah,
the most important
that's the
thing.
first
And
thing
tell your
that we
friends.
asked for.
Yeah.
All right, Mark.
It's a shame I don't live in Chittenden County, because there's so many people up here that I really appreciate and I would vote for. I remember the little event that we had a couple of years ago down here right before election. Actually, it's here on file at 17, where we had a great racial justice reform discussion. As far as what is, what's good, for me in terms of what people can do. Again, I'm in Washington County and for High Bailiff, and I think that what's important to understand, with the position of High Bailiff is I think that if I do my job, then nobody else will ever have to ask what it is again. Okay. If I do my job in about 2 years, nobody's going to ever come up to me or you and ever say, what is a high bailiff?
All right.
There's a lot of history that goes into, especially in Washington County, in terms of the use of the high bailiff. In fact, before Sam was in office there was a high bailiff that served before him because our previous sheriff had a felony. Okay, so we are also the only county who ever has had an impeachment. So the high bailiff's responsibility is not just to arrest the sheriff, but also to serve as a stopgap, to a fail-safe, if you will, because this is an elected law enforcement official, okay, to hold that place, to hold the fort until such time as that position can be filled, okay? And what that implies and what it screams is something that nobody ever wants to talk about: police oversight, right? What that means is that means that there has to be somebody who is not just willing but able and capable of stepping in at the times where things go sideways. So hopefully what that means is a collaborative effort. What it should mean is whoever is serving in that capacity, maybe they shouldn't be a law enforcement officer for a change.
Right.
Maybe they shouldn't already be a part of the local sheriff's agency to which they're actually the high bailiff of for a change.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And maybe they should at the same time work in close coordination with that sheriff to understand, the internal operating procedures and the nuances of that the sheriff's agency, and also be willing to show up and just to be there and be supportive of the sheriff, okay?
Right.
So I think how a person could support me in that effort is when you see me on the ballot, when you see me as an independent on the ballot, then don't put a check next to the person that you've been putting a check next to for the last 12 years without even knowing what he does.
All right. That's it. I like it. Go vote.
That's all I got.
Go vote. Go vote.
Go vote.
Together we win. The togetherness shows up in those polls.
Yep.
All right. Scott, what can people do to help you out?
Well, I'm guessing most of your viewers are up in Chittenden County and not in Rutland, so probably not going to be coming out to canvass here. But we're going to have virtual phone banking. We're going to have social media using Hustle to text people,
Nice.
and we're going to have tools to help volunteers identify their friends who can vote for me in Rutland County,
Okay.
and reach out to them automatically on their smartphones. So the place to start is go to scottgarren.com, SCOTTGARREN.com, and sign up, enter your email, and we'll reach out and be in touch when there are virtual things that folks can do to help out. And I think there's a donate button on that page somewhere.
Nice.
All right. All right. Very good. That's cool. It's a good setup. It sounds like you're good to receive some volunteers, some people to help you out. And if anybody has any trouble contacting any of the candidates, or if you have any other questions about the show and stuff, radvt.org and radnh.org for New Hampshire. You can connect with all of our campaigns, see lists of all the endorsed candidates, of which there are a lot more than are on the show tonight. And so your support, again, when we started with Rights and Democracy, you kept hearing it a lot. Together we win, and that's how we do it. Political power comes from numbers, comes from people, so that's why Rights and Democracy really tries to be this grassroots, people-powered organization, because while campaign financing can get a big message out to a lot of people and kind of overpower a lot of voices, voices can overpower the money very simply by getting out there and just getting out there and getting your voice out there. Vote. Your vote is your voice. Okay, your vote is your voice.
Absolutely.
So, we've got, I believe we may have another caller calling in, Scott. So if I pick up that line, just hang out on hold there, and we'll come back to you. Okay?
Will do.
Okay.
That means he's getting ready to hang up on you, Scott.
Yeah, right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, just a minute then. All righty, here we go. Hello, you're live on Rights and Democracy Television.
Yeah, I was wondering wondering, what do you guys think is going to happen to the Moran plant? They used to talk about that a lot, then it dies down, then it talks up a little bit, and dies down. It kinda just- I was just wondering,
Fantastic. Thanks for bringing that up. That's an issue.
Thanks for taking the call.
This is a. Would you like to stay on the line, or are you gonna
Sure.
jump out?
Oh, that's all right.
Well, so this is a Burlington issue. We don't want to spend too much time on it today, but we have tried to focus on some of development issues in Burlington, and
I can understand that. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on it or anything, but it's times it comes to the highlight and then it dies down, Nope.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the call.
it'll stay a big issue. Don't worry about it. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank
Bet.
you. All right, cool. All right. So that was a little bit off topic, but that's okay. So for the rest of the show, we'd like to dig a little bit deeper into kind of something that's been going on in our political atmosphere in Vermont. And as Mark was mentioning earlier, that it infects everything. It infects all of us, and it screws up everything beyond one problem that's getting caused. So I guess what I just want to mention, bring everybody up to speed, State Representative Kaya Morris, we'll get right back to this. I got a phone call on line one. Hello, you're live on Rights and Democracy Television.
Hey, I think this is me again, Scott.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Hey, Scott.
Perfect. Okay, so State Representative Kaya Morris has been influenced and intimidated, threatened over the past 2.5, 3 years since she first got elected to state representative seat. She has now since resigned because of that intimidation and pressure that she's received from members in our communities. Hopefully some of the people that get a chance to watch this show. And seeing as how she was an endorsed candidate a long time ago, and I'm talking to endorsed candidates today on the show, I think we just want to make sure that we show our support for Kaya and denounce any of this behavior where we're targeting people, especially a person who's a politician who is putting their best efforts out there for the community to help everybody, and to see them get treated in such a way where they feel like they're not welcome in that atmosphere is just a horrible thing for Vermont to let infect our world. And I'm sure it's been going on for a lot longer than just now. So with the last minute here, I'll try to get a little bit of a response from each of you.
Well, it's absolutely appalling what's happened to Representative Morris, and I do denounce it in the strongest possible terms. And I think it highlights that really in my understanding, there are kind of two different pathways when you talk about racism. One is this kind of overt person-to-person racism, and a lot of people like to pretend that that's a thing of the past, but it's obviously not. I mean, there may be fewer people who use the N-word or, do something overt, but obviously overt things have been done to Representative Morris. On the other hand, there's also systemic racism, and that needs to be addressed as well. Both need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just say, just with the last minute or so, is that let's not be shocked, let's not be appalled. Let's everybody calm down. This has been going on forever. Every time we this happens and we pretend like we're shocked and appalled. What we do is we set ourselves back and we set ourselves up. So here you go. There's maybe close to 50,000 people in this state who are affected by systemic racism, by being shut out and locked out of all systems: housing, economic development, employment. It's real, it's alive, and everybody's impacted. You know, my heart goes out to her, but let's not forget about everybody else just because this is so high profile.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott. Everybody, we've got about 10 seconds left. Sorry, we touched on everything I wanted to touch on. I think we had a great show.
Yeah.
Thanks all the viewers.
Thanks for
all
having
the guests for being here. Thanks, Scott, for joining us on the phone.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
See you, Scott.
Bye.